Your guess is as good as mine as to what might come out of the January 6 hearings that are coming up this week. But at least one representative, Jamie Raskin, who's been on the show multiple times, has a pretty bold plan. And he believes that not only coming out of this should we have recommendations to make it easier for people to vote without needless fraudulent challenges and all that, but to go way beyond that, actually overhaul the US election system by getting rid of the Electoral College. Woo. That is apparently one of the big things separating him from, for instance, Liz Cheney. 3 sources familiar with their conversations say that they don't agree on the fate of the Electoral College. So Raskin is a former constitutional law scholar. That means he's an expert and thus can't be trusted in 2022. Anyway, so he's pushing for that. He says it should be abolished, that if presidents were elected by a popular vote, this would protect future presidential elections against the subversion that Trump and his allies tried to pull off in 2020, which was a laughably, comically inept attempt to manipulate the system that produces electors and thus leads to certification and all that. If you didn't have the Electoral College, that added layer of control over the outcome, elite control of the outcome, then it just would have been the actual vote and they wouldn't have had as much room to potentially overturn the results. Now, that does not mean that they would not have any ability to overturn the results. They were trying, for instance, in Georgia to find 13,000 votes. That would have avoided the Electoral College issues that Jamie Raskin is trying to present to them. But what do you think about this?
Never gonna happen. If you can't, this is the one where I'm gonna be real Iadarola about it and be like, yeah, lol, keep dreaming. Wake up, sleepyhead. No, I think it's good that representatives are articulating this. I'm glad that our elected officials are even saying it out loud, and it is very true. It's cumbersome, complicated, and also has insanely racist origins and arguably continues to overrepresent white Americans and wealthier Americans. So, which is what it was designed to do in the first place. But there's no reason, I love explaining to people from other countries about the Electoral College because it is like explaining to a complete extraterrestrial, because they'll look at you like you have 10 heads. I don't know who's the alien, us or them. I think we are. But they're like, what? It's not a popular vote? Are you insane? And I think, it's obviously there's okay, there can be runoffs, et cetera. You reach 50%, the way that a lot of other elections in this country are run. But the idea that we rely on electors is crazy. And especially, I think obviously what Raskin is pointing to, the fact that those electors could be compromised, that they could be strong-armed, that they could be scrapped and replaced with another slate of electors, which was again, we all realize that if they had only begun this plan months in advance, we might have gotten that. Instead, they kind of just floated it ad hoc, and folks were like, I don't know, I'm tired, I don't know. But Republicans totally will try to do this in the future.
Yeah, look, it doesn't make sense to anyone. And if you were to have an actual debate, so at least over the past decade or two, the side that generally is more in favor of getting rid of it would be the left or the Democratic center or whatever, the center, which doesn't mean what people imply it does. And the right tends to like the Electoral College. Now, you might think if you're new to American politics or perhaps you live internationally that, there must be some sort of core ideological distinction that leads one side versus the other on this issue. No, there's no strong philosophical case for why we should have the Electoral College. The right just likes it because the only time when the result would be different between the popular vote and the Electoral College, it almost always would go the same direction. It benefits them when it doesn't. So it's purely pragmatic. They like winning elections that they would otherwise lose, and thus they're against reforming the Electoral College. Now, understand, they're in favor of keeping the Electoral College, even though it is obviously supposed to be another, albeit ineffective, generally firewall to stop the popular will from producing political outcomes. This is a right wing that considers themselves anti-establishment, anti-elite and all that. And they love these sorts of obstacles to popular democracy. They're literally in some cases talking about reinstituting, like getting rid of the direct election of senators. So there's a lot of ideological confusion on the right to exactly what their relationship with the elites are. I agree with Francesca. I don't think that this is likely to happen, just because if it were to, that would be a good thing, and it's 2022, so why would that happen? But there's no philosophical case that they're presenting. The only thing they might say is, well, really fast. The only thing they might say is, it is right to give people who live in one state way more political influence because that's the deal that was struck early on. Okay, sure, but they've gotten hundreds of years of outsized influence. Why are we as Californians worth so much less? I don't know. The whole thing is ridiculous, Francesca.
Well, and in effect, they get around that exact question by just being racist, right? Because California is full of immigrants and they're undocumented immigrants and they all vote. Yeah, that's why. Or they're all on drugs, or they're all gay. There you go, done. See how easy that was? Just to just disenfranchise a bunch of voters. And so they do that time and time again because otherwise. And this is so dumb that we don't talk about every single time one engages with a Republican. Hey, why is it that you guys haven't won a popular vote for president since what was it, George Bush's first election? Maybe
because you stole them all. It's all
number
fraud.
One, you
My
stole.
team would never lose, never, because we're good. So thus, if we lost, it's because you stole it. That's how simple-minded people live their lives.
If it were a sport. I mean, if the election was a sport, how many people would lose their minds at the point system, at this insane point system? Like, you made more touchdowns, you got more points technically, but I don't know, you like picked your wedgie a few times, but we're making the refs decide. There's a bunch of like coaches that are actually going to decide who wins. We're nominating them. No,
that's anti-elite. Yeah, I like it. For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.